I mean,
Hey
can you
everyone.
hold on for a second? I'm not quite ready. I'm joking.
Hey everyone. Welcome to another conversation on just catching up, the recent recap, if you will. We're going to be talking a little bit about things that have been in the news for the last few weeks that are kind of interesting, kind of relevant. Hopefully, really came about this week. So this is our second episode doing this, so we don't really know how it's going to go. But we have with me Major, who has been with me for a few years, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the life sciences. So, Major, what has really struck out to you as something that's worth discussing?
So that everyone's aware, who's watching is aware, we have a list of topics that we kind of go through of what we want to kind of talk about. And today, something that stuck out to me was CVS and how they're planning to expend or do something with clinical trial access. Joining forces with, is it Medable?
It seems to be Medable, yeah. So I thought it was kind of interesting because when you think about CVS, when I think about CVS, I think of the place that I used to potentially go and work in as a pharmacist. And they spent the last few years sort of just changing who they are. There was that time during the period with Theranos where they were actively considering joining hands and becoming a place where you could do diagnostics. Then I know right now I went into my CVS because I have some medications to be filled, and they have a huge healthcare practice that they're really leaning into, and that's where you're getting your vaccines and the like. So it's not such a huge deal to sort of see them going into clinical research. On the other hand, while there are pharmacists in clinical research, they're not as common. So to see a major behemoth like CVS get into clinical research is surprising to me. So what was your take as someone who's a patient coming into this idea of how would you take it if CVS was, like, the pharmacist was pitching clinical trials to you?
Well, before we kind of go into like what my take was, maybe we summarize the article itself just a little bit to kind of provide some sort of context.
Sure.
What we're talking about in our article, it's titled CVS Medable Join Forces to Expand Clinical Trial Access. So that's really the crux of what we're talking about, in case you're joining us right now. So my take on it is I've got some questions with regards to like how this affects the customer, how these patients are being identified, and how does this affect informed consent, and and on top of that, like retail pharmacies lean heavily on their pharmacists and their pharmacy techs. How does this change the current services that they're offering? That's kind of where my mind is at with that.
Those are really good questions.
You act like you're surprised. Like, good questions.
Well, I was expecting you to sort of be more responding, but no, those are some excellent questions to get into. I think the first question you talk about is the idea of privacy, and have patients. I'm thinking about myself and my role as a patient. Did I ever agree that you could contact me just because I went to your pharmacy? And I don't remember ever doing that. So I'm not sure how okay I am with you using my data to say, oh, I'm going to pitch clinical trials to you.
Like, are they going to slip it in when you get your prescription next? Like, hey, sign this. And oh, by the way, here's an insert.
and that's the thing. And that feels fundamentally wrong somehow. But I think it's an interesting question. The question is, can they now pitch things to me based on my pharmacy data? I mean, we kind of saw that risk with Amazon got into pharmacy, and
now you have Mark Cuban with his entity. So here's a question for you. Considering you were a retail pharmacist, this kind of hits home with you. This is like your background, right?
Yep.
So if you were working, imagine you're a retail pharmacist and you've already gone through COVID. The headache that is that, and now you're it's suddenly placed on you that, hey, you have this extra responsibility to provide informed consent. What would that look like to you?
See, I kind of have multiple issues with that, because the first part of it is, when I did pharmacy, it's considered to be almost the golden age of pharmacy, in that people were talking about how the work was more responsive and was sort of worth it. And now it's become all about metrics. And in fact, it's gotten so bad that the pharmacists are saying, we just don't want to work. I'd rather be jobless than work in retail. So that you're seeing massive lists of people who are just not working. And you're seeing that in the types of responses you're getting, for example, from CVS, who recently, I think I got a text message today saying that my pharmacist is going to take an hour off or a half hour off for lunch, which I think was completely overdue. So I think it's changing the way pharmacists are being engaged. The question is, how comfortable would they be going from the typical retail pharmacy setting to becoming more of your healthcare concierge and talking to you about clinical research? I love the idea of it, and I think most pharmacists would love breaking up their day to talk about that. The question is, do they have the time to start doing the research that brings you into that second conversation? Or,
well, then it's also like, do they want to do it? Like,
right.
They're already filling out, it's a thankless position. It's one of many in this, current scenario. And I can't, when you're filling out Betty Sue's insulin, are you really going to want to sit there next to her and like, how, when you have, you definitely are, you probably definitely want to help inform her of what her options are, considering her circumstances, but you also have all this whole backlog you've got to work out. So, and on top of that, management's like kind of breathing down your neck about like, hey, you need to meet these numbers and get this out the door. And well, I need staff. So now are pharmacists going to be like the new traveling nurses? Like, are we going to start seeing that kind of endeavor? Like, well, how do you see that?
So I think that you're going to see pharmacists working with traveling nurses. So I think the real,
I can see that.
Real concern is not for traveling nurses. I don't think nurses are going anywhere. What it really
no. Are you aware of like the pay gaps between like so if you want to be traveling nurse, like it's obscene, like how much more you could get working in New York or here or there, and there's legislation to cap that kind of thing. My point is, and I'm not saying traveling nurses go into the pharmacy. That would be kind of neat. That would definitely help out with staff. I'm talking about pharmacists. Like, are they going to be the new traveling nurses? Are they going to be the new, like, so the pharmacist in, New Jersey, are they going to come to Texas? Right. Like in more dense areas that need, because CVS, these retail pharmacies, they're a network. And so they're going to know, where they're going to have a denser area or a more populated area or an area that has more need and less staff. So they're going to be able to kind of make these recommendations and kind of shift their staff everywhere. Is that going to be a thing?
So to tell
you, or am I just like going everywhere, like off the chain? Like, is that...
Well, I've done it. I actually did that 20 years ago, where I would travel all over the state as a traveling pharmacist.
Oh, so it's like a circuit pastor or something, like where you just kind of go everywhere. Do you carry like a little medicine bag? like branded for CVS or Rite Aid?
I actually did it for a couple of hospitals. I did it for ambulatory care. So I've done that before. So I don't think that's even a new function. Okay.
The more you know.
Yeah. But I think what you're really referring to is this idea of this new paradigm that's coming around, which is in clinical research, the way it works as it works right now is you go to the doctor's office, the doctor says, here's a potential clinical trial if you want to be involved in it. And if the patient wants to be involved, the nurse or the doctor will do the informed consent, and then the patient will be part of the study. Here's how you're switching that paradigm. You're now landing up in a scenario where the pharmacist is saying, oh, I see you're on all these medications. Would you like to be part of a clinical trial? And then working with the nurse to enroll them into the clinical study. The big question is, do patients trust their pharmacists like they trust their doctors? Because the truth is that doctors have really good databases of patients, but I can tell you that CVS probably has a better database of patients. But doctors have diagnoses, and I don't know if CVS has a diagnosis that goes with it.
So I used to get, a flu shot with my doctor, right?
Yeah.
And more recently, flu shots have been offered, at the pharmacy. It's a thing, and so now the comfort level, like we've already passed that milestone. That comfort level is already there. People go get vaccine, like they're getting vaccines now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's. It's just a thing now where that comfort level is already there. I don't really think that, the question is, are they going to, I mean, I guess to some extent, like in terms of diagnosis, yeah, they're going to trust their doctor. Hopefully, hopefully
that's my point.
Right.
I think my question is, you absolutely, I think you've crossed the barrier of, can pharmacists dispense vaccines? I think we're past that question a long time ago, actually. But will someone trust their pharmacist to advise them on the right clinical trial to be part of? Is a question no one's ever asked before. And it's always been based on the idea that you know what my health conditions are. And do pharmacists actually know the answer to that question? Would you trust, if you went into a pharmacy and the pharmacist came to you and said, Major, here's your Rogaine, and here's your other drug to cause hair growth. Would you trust the pharmacist to advise you on that?
It depends on how invested I am in that question. Right.
Okay.
So, if it's something that is like, just like, hey, what's your favorite color? Sure.
Sure.
Like it's vitamins, can you OD on vitamin C? It's an over the counter thing with vitamin. No, I'm not asking you that. I'm asking the pharmacist that. That's a question I would be like, hey, can I take this, too much of this? Like that kind of thing. Like I would expect, or, they're going to be knowledgeable about that. But in terms of like introducing a diagnosis, in terms of like, hey, that's something I find a bit questionable. And quite honestly, I'm not there. I don't feel like I'm there to be diagnosed. I feel like I'm there. I've already been diagnosed. It's the customer service, the customer experience in terms of healthcare, it needs some work. And when you're at that point, you have the prescription, you've already gone through the mental gymnastics to even afford to make these payments, with whatever insurance, if you've got it, that kind of thing. And you're at that counter and you're at that handoff point. You just want the medication. You want to be out of there at that point.
Right.
It's I don't need anything else. Sure, throw it in the bag. Like please don't touch more than you have to. Like, let's just go. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
So what I hear you saying is a really interesting thing, which is when you go to the doctor, you want the time to be listened to. When you go to the pharmacist, you want to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's like, if they see an issue with the medication, or with the insurance, like they're going to let me know. It's they always do, and they've got their checks and balances, and at the end of the day, as long as like everybody is happy and I'm healthy, we're fine. Right? As long as I'm alive and making payments on something, then it's okay.
As long as you're the corner of what is it? Happy and healthy. I think that's
sure. If I'm at the corner of happy and healthy, let's do this. But I don't care about, my input. Mm-hmm. Fatigue is like I'm kind of done at that point. When I'm at that counter and I'm waiting for this script to be filled, I'm kind of like, I just want to be out of the way and out of their hair.
So let's frame that differently. What if instead of going to the doctor's office at all, you went to the emergent, like because I saw this in CVS where they have a place where an NP or a PA is available to fill your medication. And now, not Phil, talk to you about your whatever disease state you have. So it's not quite an urgent care, but it's that step before an urgent care. And
doc in a box?
I'm sorry?
A doc in a box?
Sort of like a doc in a box. But the question is, if you go there and they talk to you about, you have this disease state, let's talk to you a little bit about this, but here's another clinical trial. Maybe it's not the pharmacist having the conversation. Maybe it's CVS overall having that conversation. Would you trust that a little bit more?
Well, I don't want to turn this into, what would Major do kind of thing. Cause I may not be a representation of a significant sample size. It's it's all anecdotal at this point. Right. But
Sure.
I can tell you that like, for example, I wouldn't go to a doc in the box. I would avoid that. Just,
interesting.
I would, but that's just a me thing.
Sure.
It's really I don't like I would prefer to drive myself to the hospital than take the ambulance.
So,
right?
So to be clear, just we do want to always eliminate biases, and we should at least disclose the bias, which is Major's fiance or girlfriend is a doctor, so he has a certain perspective based on certain biases.
This is when I was homeless in Austin. This is when I was living, couch to couch in my truck. Like I wouldn't even consider going to a doc in the box, if at all. Yeah, no, if anything, it's one of those, like, I would rather be in the emergency department than walking into one of those, because to me, I see dollar signs and I see a financial commitment and obligation to pay for, for something that I at that time couldn't afford. And at this point probably still couldn't afford. So, but all of this is anecdotal. Like, we're talking about, Betty Sue coming in to fit, like, we're talking someone's grandma coming in to feel like some insulin, for example. Is it, are they going to be of the of the mindset or of the mentality to accept this information? Like, hey, would you be interested? But see, that's the thing. That's the filter point, right? That's like, hey, are they going to want to do this or not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this going to be applicable or not? And honestly, I don't know if you've been to a pharmacy recently, Darshan, but if you've got an old person in front of you, they're just looking to talk. So anything the pharmacist says, they're going to be, let's talk about that all day. So they're going to be open for this information. That's what I mean. I may not be like the best sample, example, customer experience that.
That's a really good piece of comment, and that is the target audience. But interestingly enough, in clinical research, depending on the type of study, you have what are called inclusion-exclusion criteria. So the patients who can be part of it. And when they're doing that, they usually want as close to healthy as possible without complications. So the average grandma, like you're thinking of, who wants to have that conversation may not be appropriate.
Right.
Correct. But that's a really interesting perspective or conversation about what the future looks like in clinical research. I mean, I think the idea is really interesting. They're talking about using something called decentralized clinical trials, which is really hot right now. And when you're talking about decentralized clinical trials, in what way will it be decentralized? Will it be decentralized where the pharmacy simply stores the medication? Or will it be decentralized where the pharmacy actually acts as the clinical research site and uses other techniques and other technologies to augment what they do? I mean, my big thing is, if you were going to do really, really, truly decentralized research, whether it's CVS or whether it's Amazon, will probably start using things like Alexa or any of those systems.
I like how you looked around. You're like, they're going to start using Alexa.
Well, mostly because I didn't want it to go off. I just didn't want my system to go off. But
oh man, but going back to the pharmacies though, like the pharmacies, they've been hurting during the pandemic. Their main business model was based on foot traffic through the stores. The idea being customers would come to pick up their prescriptions, and when they walk through the store, they'd pick up a candy bar, maybe a magazine, or a few groceries, when they pay for their medication. I mean, I do you remember like getting pictures? Remember those photographs? Remember having those developed at the pharmacy, and you still can, but now, like, from what I understand, like the COVID testing and the vaccine deployment, steps, all of this has kind of boosted their bottom line, and they're looking for more ways they can provide services for their client or for their customers, right? And for the patients. And so this is another step in that direction. And so, who does this really help? And again, how does it help them? And is it just going to be a bump in the road for the current staffing situation?
I think we still have to figure this out, right? I think everything's still being considered, being negotiated, and I think that's going to be interesting. And in fact, I think what you really have to figure out is what, and I think CVS is sort of playing it close to the vest. They're trying to keep it as a bit of a trade secret, and they're trying to decide what they want to do. And we'll find out more as decentralized studies evolve, as clinical research evolves into this new direction.
I wouldn't be surprised if Walgreens and Rite Aid, the other names, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how, when we say like retail pharmacies, are we talking about the Rite Aids, the Walgreens, and the CVSs? Are there any other big name pharmacies like that are retail?
Sure. You got. I mean, those are three big ones, but there used to be obviously Eckerd and stuff of that. But
Eckerd's, wow, that was a long time ago.
That is going back a while.
Yeah.
But,
I remember that blue logo. That's.
I mean, you got a lot of the supermarket chains right on top of that.
Right, right.
And then you have the ones, Duane Reade, for example. That's like a New York one.
Okay, I will take your word for it.
Fair enough.
But no, the reason I'm asking that is like, similar to like the social media giants, right? Facebook, Google and Twitter. Is it like, is that like they are the Facebook, Twitter, Google of
they are
resales? That's what I was asking.
I think you're right.
If I'm missing anything else.
No, I think the part that you have to also recognize is that CVS, for example, and Walgreens are very, very what's referred to as vertically integrated. So in that they decide what payments will be like they own their own PBMs, so the payment systems. They own their own distributors. Like there's a complete vertical integration. So it kind of makes sense for CVS to have gotten into this. I think it's going to be harder for, say, a Rite Aid to really match what these other firms are doing because Rite Aid is not really as vertically integrated. But you're going to see a CVS and a Walgreens go toe-to-toe for a while. Something like Mark Cuban probably isn't playing in this space, not for a while.
That's kind of like a one-off, though, I think, from what I remember.
Yeah, I know I'm supposed to be impressed by what he's doing, and I like the idea of what he's doing. I just don't think that the effects are going to be what people expect. I think the other one, I remain more optimistic about some of the mail order ones. So your capsule or your pill pack or any of those. But I think that those have their own place in the system. So you can't do that for if you're sick. If you need an antibiotic right now, you can't wait till someone delivers it to you. You need it today. So that role still exists, and there's that opportunity to capture a patient coming in for a clinical trial at that moment. So we'll see. We'll have to play it out a little bit more. We were trying to discuss at least 2 topics, but we're already well past time. So we should probably just come back maybe next week or the week after and have another continued conversation. Major, any last words?
That's all I got.
Awesome. This was wonderful. Thanks again, Major.
Thank you.